20 years, give or take. That's how long it had been since Joseph's brothers threw him in a pit and sold him off to a caravan headed for Egypt. 20 years of them assuming he was dead, or hoping he was. And then he's standing in front of them. Egyptian clothes, Egyptian name. Second most powerful man in the country. He clears the room of every servant and every guard, and he opens his mouth, and in Hebrew he says, "I am Joseph." Scripture says they couldn't answer him. Not wouldn't, couldn't. I believe that completely. Ancient truth for the modern week. From the dusty roads of the 1st century to the high-speed life of the 21st, we're stripping away the tradition to find the heart of the story. I'm your host, Joe, and this is Monday to Sunday. Hey, I'm Joe Stein. This is Monday to Sunday. Here's the whole reason this show exists. We all have busy lives. Some of us have kids, so there's practice for sports, or dance, or band, you name it. Our lives are busy. We sit somewhere on Sunday morning and someone reads 3 chunks of scripture out loud. We try our best to understand what it's saying, but sometimes we're somewhere else. And sometimes, because of those busy lives, we had to miss the service altogether. Life is loud, and Sunday is quiet, and loud wins. Even some Sundays can be loud, so we come back midweek. Same 3 readings you might have heard this past Sunday. No new material. We just sit with them a little longer than a Sunday morning lets you. Let's start with Joseph, because that's where the Sunday readings start us. If you've been with me the last couple weeks, you know we've been walking through Genesis more or less in order. A few weeks back it was Jacob wrestling in the dark. Then it was Joseph in the coat, and his brothers deciding the family would be simpler without him. Now we're at the far end of that story. Joseph has every card. His brothers came to Egypt for food because there's a famine, and Egypt has grain, and Joseph controls the grain. They don't recognize him. He recognizes them immediately. He could do anything he wants here. He could have them arrested, or send them home empty and let the famine finish the job. Nobody in Egypt would blink. Instead, here's what the text says. Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Send everyone away from me!" So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. He clears the room so he can fall apart in private, and he falls apart so hard that the whole palace hears it anyway. Then he says the line that I keep coming back to, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt." He names it. He doesn't pretend it didn't happen. He doesn't do the thing we do where we skip the ugly part to keep things pleasant. He says out loud in the room, with all of them standing there, "You sold me. I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt." And then, in the same breath, "Do not be distressed or angry with yourselves." That's not amnesia, that's mercy with its eyes open. Now, I want to be careful here, because this story gets flattened a lot. Joseph says, "It was not you who sent me here, but God." And people take that and turn it into a slogan. Everything happens for a reason. God had a plan. It all worked out. I don't think that's what he's saying. He just told them they sold him. He knows exactly what they did, and he doesn't excuse it. What he's saying is something harder and better. It's that their worst act did not get the last word. God worked underneath it, and around it, and through it. And here they all are, alive, in a room, together. The betrayal was real, and it wasn't final. Last week we spent an episode on being in 2 places at once. On the Greek word distazo. It means standing with your feet in 2 different directions. And the picture I couldn't get past was the brothers in Genesis 37. They put Joseph in the pit, and then, the text says, they sat down to eat. You can only do that if part of you has gone somewhere else. One part of you is passing the bread. The other part knows what's at the bottom of that hole and has been muted. They stayed in two places for 20 years. That's what the silence between those chapters is. 2 decades of a family eating dinner with a hole in the middle of the table that nobody mentioned. And I said at the end of that episode that the brothers turned a person into money, 20 pieces of silver, and that you'd hear how it ends this Sunday. This is how it ends. Joseph takes the wealth of Egypt and turns it back into people. Into his father, his brothers, their kids, their grandkids, their flocks, all of them alive in Goshen. The money became a person again. And notice how he does it. He doesn't do it from the throne. He clears the room, so there's no audience, no ranks, no Egypt. And he says, "Come closer to me." He puts them all in one place. That's the opposite of distazo, and it's the first thing that's happened to that family in 20 years. Hold on to that, because Paul is about to say the same thing in a completely different accent. Romans 11. Paul asks a blunt question. Has God rejected his people? And he answers it before you can even get your bearings. By no means! Then he says the sentence I want to spend a minute on. For the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. Irrevocable. That's the word in your English Bible. In Greek it's Ametameleta. Ametameleta. Break it apart. The A on the front is a negation, same as in atypical or amoral. Then metamelomai. Metamelomai. That's a verb about changing your mind or regretting something after the fact. Meta, meaning after, or a change of position. Melomai, from a root about caring, being concerned about something. So metamelomai is that feeling of caring differently about a thing once you've had time to think it over. Second thoughts. Buyer's remorse. The reconsidering you do at 2 a.m. And Ametameleta is that with the door shut. No second thoughts. No reconsidering. Not the kind of thing God goes back and reopens. Here's why that lands for me. We are all, constantly, waiting for someone to reconsider us. You get the job and you wonder how long before they figure out they overshot. Somebody says they love you, and part of you is watching for the moment they revise that downward. We know how it goes because we do it to people. We take somebody's number out of our phone. We decide quietly that a person is a closed matter. Paul is saying that whatever God has spoken over you, he does not go back and reread it in a worse light. The call stands. Not because you've held up your end. He's writing this specifically about people who did not hold up their end. And then the gospel, which is honestly the hardest of the three. Jesus goes north, out of Jewish territory, up toward Tyre and Sidon, foreign ground. And a Canaanite woman starts shouting after him. Canaanite. Matthew picks that word on purpose. It's an old word, an ancient enemy word, the word for the people Israel was supposed to have driven out of the land centuries earlier. Matthew could have called her a Syrophoenician like Mark does. He didn't. He reached back and grabbed the word with the most history in it. She shouts, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David! My daughter is tormented by a demon!" And Jesus says nothing. That's the verse. But he did not answer her at all. The disciples want her gone. She's making a scene. And Jesus says, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel." She comes closer. She kneels. "Lord, help me." And he says the line that people have been arguing about for 2,000 years. "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." I'm not going to smooth that over for you. Plenty of people have tried. It's a hard sentence, and it sounds like a door closing. And she doesn't leave. "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." She takes his own image and stays inside it. "Fine. I'm the dog under the table. There's still bread down here. Your table is generous enough that stuff falls off the edges of it, and that's all I'm asking for." And Jesus says, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." Her daughter is healed that hour. So look at the three of them together. Joseph's brothers, who did the unforgivable thing, standing in a room being told to come closer. Israel, in Paul's letter, described as disobedient in plain language, and described in the same paragraph as never rejected. A Canaanite woman, standing about as far outside the circle as Matthew's first readers could imagine, walking away with exactly what she came for. Every one of those readings is about somebody who had a solid case for being written off, and wasn't. That's the theme this week. The circle is bigger than we keep drawing it. And I want to say clearly that this is not a story about how God is easygoing. Joseph named the sin. Paul uses the word disobedient twice in 3 sentences. Nobody in these readings is pretending everything was fine. It's about who gets to declare a person finished. And the answer in all 3 readings is, not us, and apparently not God either. Paul lands it in a sentence that should probably stop you cold. For God has imprisoned all in disobedience so that he may be merciful to all. All. Both times. Same word, same scope. However wide you make the first one, the second one is exactly that wide. Here's what I'd do with this, between now and Sunday. Think of the person you have quietly closed the file on. Not an enemy necessarily. It's usually smaller than that. Somebody at work you decided years ago wasn't worth the effort. A friend from a version of your life you don't visit anymore. You didn't have a fight, you just stopped. You have a story about that person and the story has an ending. That's what a closed file is. It's a person you've stopped writing new material about. Ametameleta. God doesn't do that with you. Joseph had better grounds than any of us, and he cleared the room and wept and said, "Come closer." I'm not telling you to call anybody today. That's between you and God, and probably a longer conversation than a podcast. I'm asking you to notice that you've done it. That's the whole assignment. Just notice. Because the psalm this past Sunday was Psalm 133, and it's 5 lines long, and it opens with, "Oh, how good and pleasant it is when brethren live together in unity," sung by the descendants of the men in that room in Egypt, who had every reason to think that ship had sailed. It hadn't. That's the week. Genesis 45, Romans 11, Matthew 15. The circle is bigger than we draw it, and the file isn't closed. On Thursday, we're coming back to these same 3 readings from a completely different angle, and it's going to be about something the Canaanite woman does that almost nobody does anymore. I'm Joe, and this has been Monday to Sunday. Thanks for walking this road with me. Now take this truth into your week, and I'll see you on the next chapter.